up the topics of the interior cleansing, whether it's interior meaning within the human being, like spiritually purifying ourselves within our hearts, or interior meaning we need to clean up our act as a community. They automatically shift over to, we have bigger things to worry about. We have like global problems to worry about. We're always talking about these things that are not very practical. And there are many reasons why that sentiment exists, that feeling exists. One of them, by the way, we may not realize is the very materialistic, very tangible nature of our times, right? Like, what does a heart have to do with the problems of the Muslims on the ground? And also, one of the reasons why we feel that way is it's always easier to think about something that will not call us to action, right? You focus on something you can't really solve right now. So you get busied from doing what you can do by lamenting and drooping and complaining about the things that you can't do. And so in that case, it should be very logical for us to reconsider this. That it's like absolutely insane for us to think that complaining and worrying and crying and just scrolling and getting depressed about the state of the ummah is ever going to do anything. Like, why won't they stop bullying us? That's a big problem. Because like, think about it. Can you imagine if someone said we should like hold like a global conference or something to ask all of the rapists to stop being rapists and the murderers to stop being murderers and the bullies to stop being bullies? Just, no. If you're in your right mind, you're going to say, no, we need to start spreading more awareness about this problem and then taking steps towards protecting ourselves from the problem, because you're not going to be able to convince every last rapist to stop raping and every last murderer to stop murdering, correct? That's the nature of human beings. Strong eats weak unless the fear of Allah is there. So it's like a phenomenon throughout human history. If I can get over without consequences, I'm going to get over, even if I'm going to play dirty. So you're going to have to be able to protect yourself against those who play dirty. We're going to start giving mace to the community members. We're going to start teaching self-defense classes. We're going to tell people not to walk in dark alleys at night all by themselves. That would be the smart thing to do. What can I do to face this problem correctly? And part of that, when it comes to the ummah, is focusing on the interior, which is in our hands. And it is actually the most effective thing we can do against the external problems. Even Allah Azza wa Jal said this, وَإِن تُؤْمِنُوا وَتَتَّقُوا لَا يَضُرُّكُمْ كَيْدُهُمْ شَيْئًا. If you are to have full faith, strong faith, and have consciousness of Allah, become more aware and alert about Allah Azza wa Jal, and of course as a result dutiful to Him, their plots, their schemes will not harm you in any way. They'll always be there, but they won't always be effective. And that's why like people all the time, they say, conspiracy this and conspiracy that, and we love talking about conspiracies very much. But why don't conspiracies work against China? Why do they only work against us Muslims? Why? I'm not against conspiracies. Of course there's conspiracies. Like just, Adam alayhi salam, a conspiracy was pulled on him by shaitan. Like conspiracies are part of the human phenomena, right? Tricking people to get over. But to be bent on conspiracies, consumed by conspiracies, no, conspiracies hurt those that are vulnerable to conspiracy. They don't work with China because China is a strong nation. And strong nations are not bullied by other nations. Our ummah is weak on the ground. Like the Muslim civilization as we look at it today does not resemble at all. It's in shambles. It doesn't resemble at all what it once was. What enabled them to do that to us, right? The opponents of this ummah, those who, the colonists that colonized this ummah, what made us colonizable to begin with? How did our lands get invaded? Because our hearts and our minds were open to being invaded, right? It's an internal issue. And so that is what's worthiest of focusing on. And even the Prophet ﷺ told us that there are certain age-old ills, diseases that are internal that continue to rise and plague this ummah and jeopardize it. When he said, for example, the nations will soon invite one another to devour you, right? The hadith you all know. The same way diners invite one another to a plate. They'll say, we're going to be little. He says, no, you're going to be plenty, but you're going to be weak. They say, what's the weakness? He would say, the love of this world, right? Your heart will be contaminated. And the hatred of death. Or the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, I asked Allah to protect this ummah from like epidemics that will wipe it out. And I asked Allah to protect this ummah from an external enemy that would annihilate them. And He gave me all of this. And I asked Him to not make our hostility internal, like against each other. فَمَنَعْنِيهَا, He withheld that from me. And then even if you look historically, not just the Prophet ﷺ foretold these things, but historically, that's what happened in the history of the Ummah. The times that it got hit the hardest were the times where the dunya, the temptations of this world, seeped into the Muslim societies, and as a result caused disunity. I mean, when Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu was killed, why was he killed? That was the most devastating event, after the tranquility of the Prophet ﷺ's time and Abu Bakr and Umar. There was conflict, there was tons of conflict, but it was external. They were tightly knit on the inside. When did it fall apart? When the ummah expanded to a point where there was so much prosperity and people wanted a chunk of that prosperity, and Uthman radiallahu anhu refused to give them a share of it, and so they made up any justification, the same way we do, by the way, in our internal conflict sometimes. You make up any religious reason to say he deserves to be removed, right? For dunya reasons. He refused to make them governors of certain provinces. That's what it was. The very first time a Muslim ruler, a Muslim Khalifa, was killed from an external force, this was internal, from an external force, was because this was the Al-Mu'tasim al-Baghdad, right? When the Mongols came in and they assassinated him. It was because everybody was so consumed about themselves and what's mine and their own little city and their own little province that divide and conquer was the easiest thing in the world. When the Mongols came in, may Allah protect the ummah, but back then what happened in those times was far more vicious than what's happening today. Like 800,000 people. Some historical reports say 1,800,000 people. It's a discrepancy, but the point is about 1 million people at least were killed basically immediately on the same day when the Mongols entered Baghdad. Then they went to Bukhara and did double that, and city by city they were cleaned out. Every last Muslim, rahimahumullahu jami'an, may Allah have mercy on them all. The day that Al-Mu'tasim was killed, when the opposition is able to march all the way into the heart of the Muslim ummah, it was said that Al-Mu'tasim was sitting there in his royal court and he was being entertained, like the dancing girl was in front of him dancing, and he did not know about the arrival of the Mongols until an arrow came through the window and killed that girl. Can you imagine how consumed we were? And there are so many examples of this in Muslim Spain, all throughout history, and studying history is always very liberating. But the idea is, as one of the tabi'een said, the true difference is not the external problem. The true difference from the age of strength in this ummah and the later ages, he said that the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum, the dunya was in their hands and not in their hearts, right? And this is another part that I want to get to now for the second half of this reminder. The dunya was in their hands, not in their heart. As for us, he said, it got into our hearts. This is why Uthman was killed, he's saying, radiallahu ta'ala anhu. He said, the dunya got into our hearts, so Allah pulled it from our hands. That's the idea. The dunya needs to be in your hand. The dunya needs to be in your hand, but then it can't get into your heart. It's an important balance that requires a lot of interior work to make sure the first place and second place don't get switched. Because listen, this ummah will not rise. In deen, you're going to think I'm crazy. Just give me a minute, I'll explain, I promise. Okay? I know it's early, just imagine I didn't say it if it bothers you that much. You were sleeping. The ummah will not rise in deen until it rises in dunya first. Sounds crazy, sah? It's true. Because who said that like when you become like religious in the very limited understanding of religious, right? You become religious, like things are just going to become rosy overnight. That's not the nature of this world. This world has certain laws, a certain reality, a certain dynamics, physics. Allah created this world with them. Whoever does not respect those laws that He made will not be shown favoritism by the creator of those laws. And also, if the moment you become religious, and I keep saying it with quotes because it's not actually religious, it's like a selective, partial understanding of what it means to follow this religion, but become religious, like you're given victory, then where is the test of life anyway? Like believers automatically get nasr. Well, then everyone will just become a believer. The moment you become Muslim, a strong Muslim, you get rich and you get strong and you get happiness and you get everything. Khalas, everyone becomes Muslim. At the same time, Allah Azza didn't give us the most difficult test that no matter how religious you become, you'll get nothing in dunya, you just gotta wait for al-akhirah, right? But there's like a little bit of both on both sides. Because dunya is not the most determining factor. But at the end of the day, without confusing and jumping all over the place, you need dunya. Allah Azza wa Jalla, when He spoke about the nature of this world, about how He created it, He said, وَجَعَلَ فِيهَا أَقْوَاتَهَا فِي أَرْبَعَةِ أَيَّامٍ سَوَاءً لِلسَّائِلِينَ. And then He placed in this world its provisions, its rizq, in 4 days, سَوَاءً لِلسَّائِلِينَ, equally accessible to all those who seek it. Whether you're Muslim or not, you seek it, you get it. You seek strength, you get strength. Alright? You seek security, you get security. That's the standard rule. That's not the exception. For the seekers, not the believers, not the disbelievers, for the seekers. Equally accessible. That's why Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said what? He said, we were not able to pray in public. The deen is getting established slowly here. We were not able to pray in public until who became Muslim? Umar radiallahu anhu, when he became Muslim, was he the most religious Muslim automatically? Or were there people far? Abu Bakr was there, the Prophet ﷺ was there, right? But this was a strength in what? In dunya. This was physical strength and like strength of other dimensions as well. And so we have to climb in dunya to engage our realities, right? To excel at what we do. But the trick is that when you do climb in dunya, the dunya doesn't devour you as you're climbing. That's why you got to focus on this one. Like we have tons of Muslims, by the way, in very high places, don't we? But sometimes the cost of getting to that very high place, what you forgot en route, makes you there sometimes irrelevant. Aren't there people in the media? Aren't there people in politics? Aren't there people that are extremely wealthy? But en route to becoming extremely wealthy, the Muslims lost all sorts of benefit from that person. And that's why, subhanAllah, the Prophet ﷺ said to us, I'm not worried that you become poor. You're supposed to seek to become wealthy and established, resourceful, but I'm not worried about, what I'm really worried about is when you get rich. And then you start competing in the riches. And competition won't just happen, because that's what's going to cause the infighting, right? It will not just happen in money. And that'll be my last point. It will happen in egos more than anything else, right? I mean, all of the different conflicts that you see around the world, the debates you find online, the viciousness you find between Muslims of different, I don't want to say sects or groups or organizations, and my brand and your brand. What's all of this? This is all ego. This is all like hudud nafs. This is all about me, right? Me, my group. It's all groupism. But where does that come from? It comes from you being so bent on the dunya, like pulling things your way, worried about it, like me not being able to get it right if I don't pull hard enough. Even the assumption sometimes that like without me the ummah is going to fall, right? Some people feel like they have to say something in the most nasty way, like as if like the ummah is dependent on them. That's an internal problem, wallahi. It's very arrogant of us to think that way. And I don't want to branch out too much. I really don't. But let us realize that we sometimes in religious spaces may not realize that we have one more battle to fight. And that battle is the battle against ourselves. It's very tricky. Because alhamdulillah, we're in the masjid. I was trying to think of what to speak about to Muslims who pray Fajr in the masjid. Tabarakallah, may Allah increase you that way and keep you that way. Because you may have gotten past the lure, the temptation of certain things, money, fame, shopping, cars. But there is one thing left that you have to get past, and that is yourself. Yourself. Shaitan got past everybody. He outdid everybody. And then when did he trip? When he looked back and said, I did pretty good. When he didn't realize that there was one more person ahead of him, and that was him. Right? He tripped on it. And when the higher you go, the harder you fall. So you have to never look back and say, I've arrived, I'm entitled, I'm not going to make sujood. Right? This is the most dangerous thing we can do to ourselves. And we see this in all of our internal conflicts. Perhaps the most obvious of them, to be honest, is our marriages. We can be religious on so many levels, and then we refuse to recognize the difference between us being the leaders of our homes and between the limitations in our leadership in our homes. And so we violate. We violate. That's what the Prophet ﷺ said. He said, "Taqul dhulma," beware of injustice, because it destroyed the people before, because it is darkness on the day of judgment. He said, "Wattaqu shuh." No, I'm sorry, he reversed it. "Ittaqu shuh. فإنما أهلك من كان قبلكم الشح." Beware of greed, pulling your way. Greed is not just about money. Beware of greed, because nothing destroyed the people before you like greed, like pulling your way. He said, and beware of dhulm, and beware of injustice, because when you are greedy, you're automatically going to pull too hard. You're going to violate. And beware of dhulm, he said, because nothing destroyed the people before you like dhulm, it drove them to violate each other's sanctities and spill each other's blood. That was in here. And then on the opposite end as well, the difference between, for the spouses, our wives, our sisters, the inability for them also to know where their, rightful, just grievances are. Difference between what is this authority or is this abuse of authority. So they may lean because they're one of the two disputants, so they're going to be unfair, right? They're going to say, this is abuse of authority. And we will lean on the opposite end, in the other dhulm, and say what? This is my authority. When this is not in reality true. It requires a great deal of humility to say, I'm not part of the fight, I'm going to remove myself from the equation and just come to Allah's deen and say, where do I have authority and where don't I have authority? And for her to say, where does he have authority, where does he does not have authority? Or else we will have that power struggle in our house. And if it's in our house, then it's definitely going to be in our masajid. And if it's in our masajid, it will definitely be between masajid. And if it's between masajid, it will definitely be in the ummah. And in reality, this is a spiritual problem. And sometimes it's easier to pray your 5 and fast your Ramadan and pay your zakah and go to Hajj and Umrah. But the internal cleaning, the deep cleaning, is the hardest work. That we are supposed to be doing all of these other things to try to reach, inshallah. They said to him, Ya Rasulullah, this man prays at night and then in the morning he steals. Meaning forcefully, or he cheats people out of their money. He's greedy basically. In the morning he steals. What did the Prophet ﷺ tell him? He didn't say there's no point in praying at night. Some people today would say something like that, right? What's the point of these religious people? They have very bad akhlaq and they're always fighting. And no, he didn't say that, alayhi salatu wasalam. He said, سَتَمْنَعُهُ مَا تَقُولُ. He will be prevented by that which you said. That thing you said about him, that he performs night prayers, that will prevent him. When will it prevent him? When he gets better at it. We are supposed to excel and finesse, perfect our ibadat, so that they make us more aware of Allah, so that we can rinse with the awareness of Allah that unnecessary, excessive awareness of ourselves and demand for ourselves and violation of others that happens because of being too centered on ourselves. I hope that was somewhat coherent, and I hope Allah benefits me and you with it. It's always great to see everybody here at the East Plano. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. 25. Alhamdulillah, I kept it at 25.
Pretty good.
Alhamdulillah. I'll try to behave.
You have till shuruq anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much.
I prefer Hanafi masajid because there's less time to shuruq. You get to cheat with your edges.